Hello and welcome to the second episode of the Corner of Hot Takes in Ontario. This is your host, Mike Hattery, and my co-host, Gage Will. We're about to dive in on a couple of Indians topics brought to you by Tribe Twitter. But first, I've been looking for a way to buy tickets without having to deal with a frustrating app or anything like that. And I think my partner, Gage, is going to break down a way for you to buy tickets affordably and effectively.
Yeah, if you don't want to go on StubHub and deal with messing with StubHub online and paying $2 of fees for one part and $4 for another part, you can call Minuteman Tickets at 614-943-3000. That's 614-943-3000. There's no fees if you call them, and you'll be helping support a locally owned business down in Columbus, and it's just a couple fans that started it, just like everybody else. So they're pretty trustworthy guys, and they'll sell your tickets for you as well if you want to do it. If you want to go that route, but if you want to talk to real people and not deal with StubHub crazy fees, call Minuteman Tickets at 614-943-3000.
I don't know if you've ever had to deal with like something going awry with Ticketmaster or StubHub, but it's a nightmare. And Minutemen can give you really good service when something goes awry. All right.
Yeah, yesterday my tickets disappeared from my orders part of StubHub. Wish Minuteman was out in Arizona.
Me too, man. Me too. All right. Here we go. Time to talk baseball. So we elicited a couple of fun questions on Twitter. The first, which we're going to sort of dive in on, are first round picks and comp picks. Which ones have you bailed out on? Which ones have you not bailed out on? So the biggest keys recently that we're going to talk about that were raised, Mike Poppy, Brady Aiken, Will Benson. Dive on in, Gage.
Well, we'll start with Poppy because he's the oldest of the bunch and had a really, really depressing season in AAA last year. Kind of off of a couple where it was kind of a make or break season for him, I thought. But he jumped in level. But at 25, with a bad season of AAA under his belt, it kind of looks bleak over there. Uh, we talk about things we can latch onto, and he's got his walk rate that was always 14, 15% in the minors, but this past year in AAA it dropped to 10, and 10 is still above average, but for a guy that depends on it so much for his production, I mean, I wouldn't even say Santana because he hit in other aspects too, but Poppy needs that walk rate to be up around 15%, and the drop to 10 is kind of mortifying for me from a prospect standpoint.
Yeah, Mike Poppy, I would not be shocked if he's out of the organization after spring training ends. He's always had a passivity problem. He's one of these guys that has racked up a really high walk rate, partially driven by the fact that he just doesn't swing enough. He's not aggressive enough in the strike zone, so he's never tapped into what is like a strong upper body, and really, added the power that he would need to build out his profile. And without anything other than average power, he can't carry that walk rate into the big league level because his eye is solid, but it's not exceptional. It comes from passivity. So I think Poppy's done with Poppy. Benson's the one that actually I'm like fairly excited about. Will Benson. I know I'm not supposed to be.
Last year
he had a really good year, and you look, guy hit 44% fly balls first year, 50% last year, hits a ton of line drives. Dude is he's sculpted of the clay of giants. He's got tons of raw power.
19.
He's 19. He's hitting fly balls. He has tons of raw power. The strikeout rate's high, but that's the big thing. He just has to cut that strikeout rate, and when he's young for level every year, him running a super high strikeout rate's fine. Those strikeout rates aren't that much higher than what Zimmer was running when he was like average age for level. And, Benson's facing level 1 and 2 years younger than it.
Right, and he's probably going to see high A this year.
Absolutely.
And maybe they might start him in low A, and he's fast. He's got that power frame to go along with some decent wheels from everything I've read. I've never seen him live, but all the reports I've seen say he's got some foot speed.
Yeah, he's going to be, I think he's someone who could profile as a really athletic right fielder with power and a 10 steal, 10 steal sort of profile. And that's friggin' dope. I just think that we could see him really rise to the top of the power grades in the minor leagues. The one thing, he has a really good walk rate. It's just, we're just watching the Ks, right? That's all we care about for next year. Can he make some K gains against older competition?
Yeah, and like with Naquin, or you'll hear complaining about the Ks, but for a guy that walks a lot too, I guess it's not as big of a deal for me. And you just know he's getting deeper into accounts, and maybe there's something he can turn there to drop that under 30,
Yeah, and I mean, the guy has the power to carry a high walk rate because he's not going to see a ton of strikes. It's not a thing where you have a guy like Papi or even Yandy to a lesser extent. Yandy's gonna walk at above average level, but there's a point to which if you don't have enough power, pitchers pound the strike zone enough to diminish your walk rate at the big league level. And I just don't think that we're going to see that sort of problem with Will Benson because there's so much power in there.
Yeah, I'm with you on Benson. I'm excited to see what he does this year because I feel like last year was kind of his launching pad year, and this year is the one where he could really find himself on a lot of top 10 lists.
Absolutely.
With a solid year this year, even though that's pretty stacked and we both like the top, there are a couple guys that he could leapfrog, I think, on the back end of that list.
And I think he's someone who sort of still retains, like, he probably has a top 3 ceiling in the system.
Yep.
Just massive. And he's shown signs of tapping into it. I think I don't like to throw ceiling around unless we've seen a guy sort of like scratch at some of the parts of it that he can do. His power was awesome last year, and I think there's a way in which we can sort of say, hey, we've seen him scratch at what he can do. I think that ceiling is massive.
He's carried a almost 240 ISO and homered every 23 plate appearances. That's incredible for a guy in 19 in low A.
Definitely.
What's that?
Let's talk about Brady Aiken. That's a fun conversation, right?
That's an exciting one. What the heck happened to that dude?
So I kind of go back to, I think he's kind of like irrelevant unless he like makes himself up as some sort of loogie or his arm magically I don't know. I don't know if he runs into some sort of nuclear waste ISO thing that converts his arm into some sort of robotic mechanism. But I mean, I think we've lost the velo ceiling on him. Unless he's a cyborg, essentially, I'm not very optimistic in Brady Aiken. But I still think it was the right pick. Was it the right pick? It was the right pick, right?
Yeah, I mean, and there were some promising things early. Like, he's never been great in the lower levels, but at least at the beginning, he was K-ing guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the better quality hitter he faces with just a limited. I mean, the curveball isn't back either, which was a huge part of it too. I just think with reduced velocity and probably reduced spin rate, it's not going to work.
He walked more guys than he struck out last year in 132 innings.
Yeah, it's not great. Not great.
No, and there is some things like 50% ground balls. I mean, that's great if you can miss a bat once in a while.
Yeah, and I think he's someone who, if we didn't know he was a first-round pick and looked purely based on his stuff at this point and his production, would be in danger of being cut.
Yeah,
I mean, that's just sort of the reality with where we're at with Aiken. Maybe he can remake himself, but I mean that's like a 1% probability.
Well, if he's not a first-round pick guy, then they're probably shuffling their cards with him and trying to see if they can find something in some relief appearances type thing.
Yeah.
A guy who's a first-round pick 2 years later to be walking 7 guys per 9 innings in low A is just not encouraging, or in high A, sorry. Just not encouraging.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's where we are on the Indians' first-round picks recently. The Indians didn't have a first-round pick in 2017. They had a second-round pick in Quentin Holmes. He has an elite speed tool. He has huge contact issues, which not a huge fan of when your best tool is speed. Something I kind of hate. But it is what it is.
Aren't we talking about Zimmer a lot last week?
Yeah. Ugh. All right. So we got to talk about Tampa, I guess, because I think it sort of relates to the Indians.
Yeah, Kevin Cash has been pretty progressive on the pitching front down there. The only the Tampa. Oh yeah, if you haven't heard, Tampa has been. I don't know if they've decided it yet. Have they?
No, I don't think it's locked in, and I think the injury to De Leon probably could impact this one way or another.
But anyway, Tampa is weighing the idea of a four-man rotation with essentially a bullpen day every fifth day that they don't have an off day in between. And I've seen some national baseball guys kicking around the idea that it's advanced tanking, and I don't necessarily buy into that, but I'll get your take on it first.
Yeah, I think that's ridiculous. No, we okay. We have moved to baseball is really different, and I feel like if you look at Jeff Sullivan did really good work on this on Fangraphs yesterday or today, essentially sort of denoted the amount of innings that starting pitchers are covering, and it is in radical decline, and it has been since the dawn of baseball. If you look at it, it's this sort of like exponentially declining curve, and I think this is part of it. This is part of what bullpenning is. There's a point at which you only have a few good starters, and they're worth going the second time through the order. It's about as efficient as like your fourth best reliever pitching one inning. But then there's a tipping point to where most teams' fifth starters, like Josh Tomlin, if the Indians could have a 30-man roster, they could create a better bullpen amalgamation on average for every Josh Tomlin start. It's just reality. And I think it's not advanced tanking, nor do I think there are a lot of assertions about bullpen pitchers' arm health that we have no way of proving, that this is some sort of some rapid attempt at destruction of usable and fungible assets by the Rays. I think that's bullshit. We know so little about how to protect arm health, and we act like there's some sort of exact science, and there isn't. And so there are things that suggest some heavier bullpen usage can be dangerous, but we really don't know a lot about usage protections for arms. So that drives me crazy.
Yeah, and we operate solely on it's almost all theoretical. We understand that this theory that more pitches is bad, and there have been studies that have been done to winnow the science a little bit in that area, but obviously it's kind of all taken for granted in the pitcher health department. I feel like a lot of people take the scientific studies and kind of champion them into, okay, well, we got to stop at arbitrary 100 pitch cutoff points. And like you said, it's all just kind of distant science. And maybe one day I'm sure we'll get better in the next decade at figuring out what's good for pitchers. But the other thing with the four-man rotation idea I wanted to say was if you got a fifth starter and Josh Tomlin, he's throwing, 180 innings?
Yeah, probably 140 or 150.
All right, well, 140. We'll work at 150. And you and I have both talked about how the Astros have used Chris Davinsky with he pitched almost 100 innings the past couple of years. So if you think about it, moving a reliever into that role, if they move a guy into a 2 or 3 inning relief role, then you've cut 67% of those innings right there. So I don't think it's that big of a deal, especially with the shift of using relievers for longer stretches and maybe fewer games to try to meet somewhere in the middle with using your starters less frequently. And that advanced tanking stuff, I won't throw his name under the bus, but that was just, it seems like we kind of want to hate MLB owners for not sinking money somewhere so much that it turns into a dislike of trying to twist every new concept brought forth into some way of harming the player or harming the team's win total, or so you don't have to invest as much in the payroll. And it kind of gets annoying because you kind of have to filter what is out there with, okay, does this make sense? And like you said, it's garbage, the tanking portion. I think Kevin Cash, especially, as being a guy who has been kind of trailblazer in the pitching usage and lineup usage in his time as manager in Tampa.
And I think we do this in the minor leagues and pitch starters more. The Indians do it in the minor leagues where they'll have a starter pitch every 4 days, sometimes every 3, sometimes every 5, sometimes every 6, where they do these piggybacks with guys who are starting guys and they're sort of like building their arm and sort of like torquing their arms up, and they go 3 innings at a time. And also, I think there are so many pitchers. I think as fastball velocity continues to increase with pitchers, there are so many guys who can throw 95 plus and have a mediocre at best secondary offering, and they're not a starter. And if you want that guy to throw 100 innings and go every 5 days instead of throw 120 innings and go every 3 or 4 days with some piggyback ops, I just don't think there's some sort of strong intellectual difference in what's happening here. I will say that on the front end, that dude's going to get screwed in arbitration. That's also something where it's the MLBPA's fault. Like, arbitration sucks. The factors that are being considered in arbitration suck. The fact that arbitration exists as a system for this sucks and will not value guys like Chris Davinsky right. But I also think that that's not a problem of the teams. They're trying to find a way to make like an organization with some really mediocre back-end pitching more efficient, because they're trying to win games. And so I don't have – this is ridiculous. It bothers me that this became a tanking argument. I'm super pro-labor. I published a lot of pro-labor crap, okay? And I just don't care about this. This is garbage. This should not be a labor conversation. And the assertion that we know so much about arm usage, especially when I think it's highly contextualized. That's the other thing. I think that I think that we may have some overarching understanding of principles of arms, but I also think based on like the sort of like individual nature of every single pitcher's mechanics, the complexity of their muscular structure, I think a lot of like arm health stuff is individually contextualized in the end. And so I think the idea that we could assert any sort of strong confidence and knowledge that this is A, endangering players, B, a tanking mechanism is great. Now,
right.
Let me kick it to you, because this is an Indians podcast, so we should somehow tie this into the Indians. So let's tie it in for me. Let's
get back to Salazar, using him. Both Mike and I agree that maybe a new way to try to use, if you don't use Danny Salazar, if you don't know what the Astros have done with Chris Davinsky, he's making about 50 to 60 appearances a year and throwing 90 to 100 innings. So, I mean, he's not your Brian Shaw who's thrown 75 times or whatever. He's less frequent, he's a high variance guy. In the high leverage situations, you want to get him in there in the 6th inning, close, use him for 2 innings. So if we spin that over to the Indians, a guy like Danny Salazar with his impeccable split change and even a developing slider might be a good candidate for that kind of role. So if you are going to go that route, you could, like Mike said, you could piggyback him off of a Tomlin start, have Tomlin go through the order once, and then have Danny there ready to go 2 or 3 innings, and maybe 2 or 3 innings a couple days later off somebody else's start. And the beauty of this is you get to pick and choose when you do it. You have Tomlin start, even though you're going to have some high leverage first inning situations. But after the first couple innings, it's clear. You're going to be down 3-0 or up 3-0 or 0-0. But that's the point. If you're up 3-0, you can go to Salazar for 2 innings. Just bridge the gap and maintain, or if you're tied. But yeah, I think that's how it fits with the Indians, because they have 4 starters who are locked into place. I think you can tell me if I'm wrong, but you got Kluber, Carrasco, Bauer, and Clevenger. I think those are your 4 best starters, most trustworthy starters. And then the bridge kind of falls off.
Hey man, don't sell Ryan. I strike out one hitter a game Merritt short.
Who?
I think that's very nice.
I forgot about him after the ALCS a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I think that's probably the right approach. I think it's so great. Like, how fun would it be to see Tomlin go for 3 innings, and he gets to spike his curveball usage rate for the first 3 innings a little bit. Like, that's the other thing. It allows you to do different things strategically with your starters, where Tomlin doesn't have to game plan for going 6 innings. He has to game plan for giving you 3 good innings. That allows him to use his arsenal differently and maximize the value of his arsenal. That's part of what's complex about a starter, is that the first time through, you try and like restrict or curb your arsenal so you can introduce second levels of your arsenal or shift usage rate to change the game theory problem. And I think when you are transitioning between pitchers, it allows one pitcher to create an upfront, more difficult game theory problem for hitters. And I think that'd be really powerful for a guy like Tomlin.
And then you can get Salazar to go away from his 4-seam.
Which is a dream world. Yeah, I think it makes a ton of sense. I get I think the one concern is their pitching is actually – their starting pitching is super talented, super top-heavy, pretty thin, right?
Right. I mean, there's no depth.
Like, they're going to – and the problem, too, is they're going to end up possibly keeping Merritt, but they're going to do it where they can't stretch him out enough because he's going to be either a loogie or like maybe a long use guy, whatever the hell they call it, a mop-up guy.
Does that even exist anymore?
I don't think it does.
No, you just use you use your, I won't say bad, but you use your bottom shelf relievers for that role, right?
Yeah, Zach McAllister can go do that. That's fine. I don't care.
Yeah, give you 2 innings of McAllister and 2
couple
innings
of
Otero, and then you're good.
Yeah, that's fine. And I think that's the problem.
Like you said, they're going to find a way to keep Merritt.
And the problem is they won't be able to do it in the rotation, which means he's then not going to be stretched out. You have a Salazar injury where he's not going to be on the 25-man starting opening day. All of a sudden, you're 1 injury away from who's the guy in AAA. I think that's what's kind of scary, because Julian Merriweather just went down for Tommy John surgery. I thought he was a better bullpen prospect, but he was at least kind of interesting as a starting pitching prospect. And that's it. Sean Moromondo sucks. Like, he's not a starting pitcher. I don't know what to tell people, but that's not his thing. So I think this is. And hey, you know what? Screw this. Let's have this conversation. This is really important. This is how you unlock Salazar as that guy. If Mike Moustakas is going to get 1 year and $6 million guaranteed, how much is Lance Lynn going to get? Or how much is Alex Cobb going to get? You have multiple comp picks from Shaw and Santana. Throw one of those away. Go give up $8 million and give yourself some rotation depth. Why aren't we doing that?
Well, because what situation does that put you in? Because then you're not keeping Merritt at all, right? Yeah, I'm not saying you need to save Merritt for anything, but they seem to have a soft spot for him based on how they went to him every time last year, right?
Yeah.
But Merritt's not going to stop me personally, but I'm trying to – maybe they like something in there. Maybe they think the soft-throwing, poor contact lefty can avoid damaging barrels enough in the major leagues. I don't know. But even then, Tomlin, you probably throw in – Tomlin's also the other wild card in that scenario. But I feel like Tomlin's got a little bit of trade value, to me at least. Who knows what the way valuation has gone, but some weeks – but like you said, we don't have depth, but it's just tough because – they need depth that they can stash in the minors, and they don't have it.
Yeah, they really don't.
I mean, like that, but you're still running into the same problem if you throw money at a Lance Lynn, right? Because you can't keep a Tomlin and a Merritt, and still have no depth in AAA.
Tomlin's been good from the pen in the past. He's shown an ability to oscillate. He's thrown 10 or 15 pen innings. He's been fine as the the like 6th inning, 5th best reliever. I mean, or like you do Clev. I don't care if Mike Clevenger wants to throw 200 innings. He's gonna walk a 200 dudes in 200 innings. I don't care.
100. Come on.
Fine, you're right. Fine, 100. It was hyperbolic.
He's not Brady.
What's crazy is that 100 is not a nuts number for him if he threw 200 innings. That's what's crazy. Like his walk rate is that bad.
What was it? Bordering right below 5 last year.
It was 4.5.
5 or 9.
Nice 4.5.
And that's the other crazy part is he can be like you said, we can live with 100 innings or 100 walks in 200 innings, and he can be effective. I mean,
yeah,
I'm not as big on him dancing on hot coals again, but he's got the stuff to miss bats to make up for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's always going to be competent. It's just such a narrow margin. Like, there's like one other dude in baseball who can walk that many dudes and be a good pitcher, and it's Robbie Ray. And Robbie Ray has way better strikeout stuff to me than Mike Clevenger.
Yeah, I haven't looked at it. Do you happen to know off the top of your head what Clevenger's whiff rate was last year?
Oh dear, no, I do not know off the top of my head. But while you,
it had to be 12, 13%, right?
Yeah,
because Kluber or the plus guys in the Indians rotation, like Kluber and Salazar, are both north of 15. That's 15% of swings or pitches induce whiffs.
He was at 12%, which is actually not particularly. It's good. It's above league average. League average is about 10.5%, but it's not special. And there's
you're
sort
talking
of,
top third though, right?
Yeah, and I mean, he's going to be fine. I just think I have a lot less optimism about him ever making a leap than like. I think there's reasons to think that our boy Bauer can make another leap, whereas like Clevenger. Like, I think a lot of his control and command issues come from the fact that he has a really bad finish to his mechanics. His mechanics are pretty messy, and they're really valuable for him to be messy. He hides the ball a while. He has a really good, like an elevated, like perceived velocity because he hides it for so long. So I think if you try to straighten him out, it's going to not really – I don't think you're going to have net gains. I think if you change his mechanics, he might walk less dudes, but he also will strike out less guys because he may not be able to hide the ball as long.
I want to kind of talk about Bauer too and shift it over that way because I think there's a perception that he's kind of capped out there, just because his last couple of years have been similar. I would say if you look at the peripherals, but like you said. There's what are your reasons for believing that there's something else in the tank? I most likely would go down the same road, but I just want to hear what you think.
You made a good criticism. I said this similar somewhere else recently. The slider is not super interesting to me unless the fastball command gets better. Like that's always like, can he command the baseball better and can he trim his walk rate? The positive thing is that he has 2 straight years of improving his walk rate, and he has elevated his ground ball percentage in those 2 years, and he ran an awesome K rate last year. So I think results-wise, that's pretty great, and he ran a really elevated home run per fly ball percentage, which I think maybe that declines a little bit.
Yeah, and he also – at the very beginning of the season, he wasn't stranding anybody, but he went on a run there in like July and August where he stranded everybody.
Yeah.
So that came back, and he finished a little bit above league average, I think, when it comes to stranding runners. So do you think that'll come back just a tad?
I think so. He ran a really high BABIP against. He ran a really high home run per fly ball. He gets a pretty good chunk of ground balls. I just think that there's a little room there, and I think he might make one more. If the question is, has he stopped making gains? Is he going to flatline on his command control gains, or is he going to make another? And I think he's bright enough and puts in the work to make another step. On the other hand,
and I kind of do like that ditched the changeup last year almost.
Yeah, it's not a good pitch.
And it wasn't a very effective pitch ever for him, and he kind of cut his usage in half on that end. And last couple of years, he's just really fun from our end because he's been that guy that's basically ballooned curveball percentage. It's tripled in the past 2 years.
Yeah, he's blessed.
He made a jump. I'm really interested, actually, to see, because he threw 11% curveballs in 15, 19% in 16, and 29.8% last year. I'm interested to see if we get a 35% curveball profile from him this year.
Yeah, and I like what the usage rate is on this slider that he's building is going to be really interesting too. I mean, he's one of those guys, like Zips is one of the most conservative projection systems, which is by its nature conservative, and it actually projects him as being more productive in 2018, which, you know, projections are projections. It's not a huge deal, but I think there is something to like that when a projection system that is that conservative is optimistic about even more strides. That's interesting to me.
Yeah, and it's a lot higher on them than like your steamer projections are. So I'm not really well versed enough to go into those depths, but it's interesting. Like you said, steamer tends to be a little more favorable, and Zips loves him a lot more.
It's pretty weird. Everybody loves projections talk. It's really important. Let's go on what are your projection system thoughts? Like, are you a fan of projection systems? Do you think they're useless? How do you use them?
Well, I like them as just an outline of kind of where because I have a tendency to look at these Indians guys and look for things I find favorable to try to make my opinion of them rise, or if it's certain players, I'm guilty of looking for things that I find unfavorable, depending on where I'm at with how they are with my perceived value of them. So the projection systems kind of balance my perceptions for me a little bit and just give me a framework of what the outside material is, or the outside perception is of these guys. In that regard, I like projection systems, but moving away from that, I think the guys that are doing this, their formulas, I could never concoct anything that extravagant or in depth. But I also think with thousands of players designing projection systems you tend to miss a lot of stuff, or you don't. Your projection system might not be as in depth as, say, a Mike Hattery deep dive.
It's a lot of sale, making a lot of sale there, Gage. Yeah, I agree with you.
Deep dives too, because they're good. Anyway, what do you think about projection systems?
It's mostly because I steal Gage's research. I like Thomas Edison and a man made of other men and women. Mostly women. I guess the final thing, I don't know. I agree on projection systems. I think they're really cool to sort of challenge your preconceived notions on player expectations, and make you rethink things. They're not, they're just sort of like, the projections we see outside of PECOTA. One of the cool things about PECOTA projections is they give you sort of like 25th percentile, 75th percentile. They give you sort of the range of projections. Sort of the ones you're going to find on Fangraphs are this sort of middle ground, or like most frequently hit projection. I just think they're a really great marker to build off of. And I think they're really fun to sort of take a look and see, where can the projection system be missing? And then, there are always things that affect the ability of a projection system to evolve. One of them, like most interestingly to me, and, this is something Adam Burke's talked about a little bit, and I think we're going to have him on the podcast soon because he's pretty dope. But one of the things we've talked about a lot in DMs is how much 1 year, like major adjustments, how can we sort of adapt to that? Because projection systems are always going to really curb those heavily, and regress to the sort of like mean and treat that as an outlier season largely. And so how do you sort of value the 1 year major adjustment breakout? What do you think? And I think that's something that's really interesting. So I don't know. But
I think they're more fickle with pitchers, to be honest, because pitchers can tweak one, like you talk about, like you said, you talked about Adam, profile changes as outliers. Pitchers can tweak one little thing, like a usage rate on their curveball, or just a release point, or something very simple like that, and it can unlock so much more for them. So I think the projections kind of fail or fall a little shorter on pitchers than they do hitters, just from basic theoretical sense. Hitters, it's harder for them to change their whole profile, even though you have your Josh Donaldsons and your Daniel Murphys and the handful of guys that are really buying into the launch angle movement. But like you said, I agree with everything about finding that one discernible skill, and I don't know if the projection systems can keep up with it.
So that's actually, I think, it's really interesting specifically for the Indians, not just for Yonder Alonso. I wrote an article that sort of like keyed on that for Alonso. I've written a couple about it. Keep rewriting my own work. It's one of my great talents. But I would say Lindor, Ramirez have both had significant launch angle adjustments over the last couple of years. Projection systems don't really like Ramirez's power gains last year. They expect a massive rejection in terms of his power gains. XwOBA suggests that that's probably reasonable, but I really do think the Indians are a really interesting team in terms of position player projections, because you have a bunch of guys who have made these sort of massive launch angle adjustments, and the projection systems can be somewhat blind to them.
And I kind of want to make a point about what you brought up for XwOBA and Ramirez. I love XwOBA. It's expected weighted on base average. They basically derive it from exit velocity and launch angle, turn it into the probability of how valuable a hit can become. And it's like I said, I love the stat, but I think for some guys it might miss its mark a little bit. Like, I haven't seen any research out there on it, but Jose Ramirez, for a guy who is extremely aggressive on the base paths. So I could see where XwOBA might underrate him a little bit, because most of the time this hit at X angles and X exit velocity is a single for 90% of guys. But you see so many times with Jose Ramirez where he's turning those balls that get cut off at the warning track by fast outfielders into doubles. Yeah. So, like I said, I haven't seen any research or kind of even done any research into it, but I think there is a theory in my head that maybe XwOBA might underrate certain guys and overrate others, just based on how aggressive they are and on the base path and how successful they are with that base path aggression.
Absolutely.
But
can we talk? I just want to be astounded again. Mike Moustakas rejected a $17.4 million qualifying offer and now has come back to receive $5.5 million guaranteed and $2.2 million in performance incentives for this season from the same team.
A 2.5 WAR player last year, and the projection system say 2.5 WAR player this year.
The Royals thought this guy was going to have the potential to be paid so much, they levy a qualifying offer on him in order to create draft pick compensation. He's so certain of the market because that's how the market's been for the last 10 years. He turns it down. Now he's coming back for basically what we paid Rajai Davis in 2016.
Yeah.
You
half
good with
of what
that?
Michael Brantley is making.
Yeah. Cool. All right, we gotta stop talking about Brantley. Greg Popelka asked us a kind of difficult question, I think, about what was going on with Corey Kluber. He struggled a little bit in both of his starts in the 2017 ALDS. Specifically, the second start was a lot worse. If it was injury. One of the things that's been really weird about this is it seems like Kluber has tried to intimate that he had an injury, then deny he had an injury, but act like he pitched through injury because he was healthy enough in these 2 starts. It's been one of the sort of weirder things PR wise that I've seen. So I think there's a decent chance Kluber was pitching at like 85%, but I think that's also what most of these guys are pitching at when they're over 230 innings and they're pitching in October.
Yeah, and Kluber doesn't seem like the kind of guy to cry wolf. Like you said, he intimated at it. Like he didn't come out and say that he had an injury, but I'm not gonna distrust something that's Kluber's saying. Like I feel like if he was hurt significantly, I feel like that's all you get from him.
I agree.
And I don't know. I love the Indians front office for a lot of things, but the way that they've played PR organization for their injuries over the past 2 years is disastrous. So I don't know what to believe from them on that front. I mean, they just have been so unclear about every injury, like the Brantley sprained ankle and Geyer. Who knows what the hell is going on with his injury? What was it, a wrist injury that's still got him hurt in spring training this year?
Yeah, that's what it looks like. It's, the Brantley one, not last year was really weird with the Brantley one too. It was just like a couple week ankle injury after they had already had major issues in terms of like Brantley being constantly pushed back, going back in for a second procedure on the shoulder. It just was really weird to see it happen again in season where the deadline just kept getting moving. And then all of a sudden we see this one sort of heroic last day of the regular season, and by heroic I mean playing in a meaningless game plate appearance. And then, Edwin Encarnacion gets hurt and he gets to hit 20 times. And heaven forbid you build a good roster for a playoff series. So,
yeah, and didn't they say the Brantley one was a sprain or something like that? I don't know what it turned out to be, but I didn't think you need surgery on a sprain.
Yeah, I'm done. We can't talk. We can't talk Brantley anymore. I can't do it.
No, we're getting back to Kluber. So
all right.
I got egg on my face still because I analyzed his game one well, he didn't even pitch in game one, but his first game against New York in the playoff series, and I didn't really even find anything that noteworthy that was different from the Kluber that was there that was dominant in August. Like, there was concern after that game 2 start that he was hurt. And I don't know if it was just some kind of, if I was just looking for confirmation bias, but I combed that, and it's just a 1-game sample too, so it's hard to take a whole lot of stock in that. But I combed it. There wasn't a huge velo drop. His pitches were moving as much as they were previously. So I don't know if it was just a comfort thing or... I wrote an article about how I thought it wasn't an injury at that time because it was really unclear. Why would the team say if he was injured anyway? But like I said, I have egg on my face from that one. I can't because he looked worse in game 5.
Yeah. I'm ceding to Gage on this. I don't have anything of value to say about this.
No,
so I'm gonna. I really have nothing. A pitcher pitched bad in 2 games. He may have been injured. I wish I had insight, but part of it is it's a tiny sample. He pitched a full year before in postseason. He pitched a full 2017 to win a Cy Young Award. He might have had a tiny velo tick, which you pointed out, but he was still pitching well in the second half. I mean, it's just, I don't know.
He was historically good from June to September too, so maybe that was just
it's an aberration.
Yeah,
I think
maybe before we go too, I want to talk about Andrew Miller.
Because Gage wrote a really good piece about Andrew Miller this week, which you should read on WFNY. He wrote it on Monday about a couple of contact adjustments. So read that, and Gage is going to talk about it right now.
Essentially, Andrew Miller makes his buck as a reliever by striking out 13 to 14 guys per 9 innings. So those guys tend to give up some hard contact every once in a while. Like you look at a guy like Kimbrel, who is a historically good reliever in Boston, but he's on the bottom half of the average exit velocity leaderboards because I think hitters just run into one, and there's not a lot of contact to weigh that down. Not a lot of poor contact. The poor contact is replaced by whiffs with some of these guys. That's my theory on that. And Andrew Miller, he was pretty consistent for the previous couple of years when allowing about league average, maybe a little under exit velocity. Some guys would run into one occasionally, but then all of a sudden in 2017, he led Major League Baseball of all guys that faced at least 100 hitters. There was nobody ahead of him. He only allowed an average exit velocity of 81 miles per hour. So I found that extremely interesting. And I don't know if you want to add anything about reliever exit velocity, but it's a really small sample, and maybe we're putting a little too much stock into it. But there were significant batted ball adjustments that came along with it that Adam Burke and I were actually talking about. We were talking about this after my piece, so it didn't really hit the piece as much, but he allowed twice as much contact opposite field. Did you see this?
Yeah. I have a opposite field. I have some really interesting opposite field contact theories.
Yeah, I'm all ears.
They're not ready yet. I'm gonna run them out soon because I'm working on a data project with my brother-in-law about the ability to induce opposite field contact and the value of opposite field contact, even on line drives and fly balls. So
now that Hattery joined the Athletic, he's just a tease.
I'm not a tease. I'm not where I need to be yet to run a theory out here. I look like an asshole.
His basically what was interesting about Miller allowing double the opposite field contact was lefties still hit the ball just about as hard off him despite the giant opposite field jump. But it was against righties where he made his buck, which I found really interesting for a left-handed reliever.
Yeah, that's weird.
The soft contact percentage jumped, almost doubled against righties.
Is that a career trend with him, or was that just 2017?
It was just 2017.
Yeah.
Everything looked pretty normal. I mean, he was normally a 20% opposite field guy, and that jumped to 40. And it's really hard for me to say, oh, this is some huge shift he made when it's just a reliever. And like I noticed too with Miller, and this could be a product of it too, he lost a mile per hour on all his pitches last year.
Yeah. Which
would be really concerning for a 32-year-old reliever. But you have to remember he pitched all the way into November and a lot more than he ever had in his life probably in that last month, right?
Yeah.
And then he pitched in the World Baseball Classic starting 4 months later. So I'm not really willing to say that fastball drops only age. Maybe he was just tired. 4-month layoff. I don't know. What do you think about the rest theories for off season? Do you think it matters 4 months to 5 months?
I think it does. I mean, I think the combination factors you mentioned, the WBC and a World Series, and a World Series in which like bullpen usage was kind of revolutionized for a playoff series. I think in that way, yeah. I mean, I think it's a pretty huge deal. Yeah. I don't know, but everybody who's listening to this who hasn't read Gage's piece should go read it. It's probably one of the most important pieces we published at WFNY in a while. It's really good research. So the last thing, I'm going to go on a quasi rant. 2 seconds.
Yeah, go.
Just saw a tweet about Giovanni Urshela's in 20 at-bats in spring training and the utility infielder race. A utility infielder race sucks because it should be Eric Steinmetz because he's the best defender of all three of them and has a little pop, which makes him interesting to me. That's a pretty hot take. Second of all, Giovanni Urshela has like 9 years of offensive futility. Okay? He's never hit the ball hard.
2014.
Hey, I'm talking here, Gage. He has never hit the ball hard, and he's never walked. And until I see him do that for 400 PAs, I won't buy it, and I hope to God he does not get 400 PAs with a team that I want to see win. So, moving on. A, that his batting average in 20 at-bats is the least valuable thing I've ever seen. And B, we know who this guy is. And C, let's move on. I'm done with it.
I want to pick at your. I like Stamets too, but I just don't know who Egon is yet.
The guy who strikes out all the time?
He struck out a bunch last year. Yeah.
No, I mean, I get he's interesting to me. Egon has a little bit of interest left just because I haven't seen him be bad. I've seen Urshela be bad in the minors. You know?
And we know Egon has a little bit of a bat somewhere in there. I mean, whether it comes to fruition at the major league level is a whole different story, but we know there is some bat there. With Gio, there is nothing.
There's a little pop there, I think. There's something there. Whatever. Gio, I like Gio. I hope he figures out his MLB career somewhere. It's just he has very limited experience at shortstop, which makes it hard for you to give Lindor days off unless you're playing Ramirez there. And you need to give Ramirez days off too. You can certainly alternate them, but I think not having a guy who can play primary shortstop well and has a track record of doing that is just not good for your primary utility infielder. I also like having a switch hitter. And Urshela may be a right-handed batter, which the Indians need, but he doesn't hit left-handed pitching because he doesn't hit any pitching. So I just don't care to watch him again.
Yeah, he had one good year in 2014 in Columbus, and I think that's what prompted our 2015 extended viewing of him.
Yeah.
But and the other thing is you got Yandy Diaz, who the organization just I don't want to say they're not high on him, but it just every indication is they don't want to use him.
Yeah.
And Yandy, if you're going to have a guy that's a third base only, believe it or not, has a decent glove over there, and he has a huge ceiling with the bat. So I feel like the Indians are in a position where they have a comfortable division lead and they can make the high-risk decisions. You can try to springboard a guy like Diaz just because if he bottoms out and doesn't give you what you need, you should still be okay. Whereas I don't want to play maybe a higher floor or Urshela with no ceiling virtually than over a Yandy or a Stamets or Egon even.
All right, let's do a quick 2.5 minutes and then we're out of here. Just like who's like one or two guys that have impressed you a little bit this spring, or something that has stood out that you think is going to affect the 2018 baseball season.
It's still Kipnis for me.
You're a Dong fan. I know it. It's fine.
Dinger, Jack, whatever you want to call it, not Dong. No, Kipnis. Because I saw something that was tweeted out today from Baseball Reference for talking about the quality of home run. Did you see that as well?
I did. Kevin Dean, always tweeting stuff.
It must have been him that I picked it up from. I can't even remember, but it said his home runs have across the home run leaderboards. They've all come across at least fringe major league guys, right?
Yeah, I mean, the highest percentage of facing major league pitching in terms of home runs. So it's pretty good.
I don't want to go all overboard on Kipnis love because we know he's the kind of guy that just goes all in fuego for a week or two and then sizzles out for a couple more weeks. So I want to make sure that's not what this is, but it's encouraging to say the least.
So I've been beating this drum a little bit. It's not super relevant, his productivity, but I think it reminds people a little bit that he can be an interesting offensive player. I think Greg Allen's going to see a lot of time in Cleveland this year. I think that how the organization handles guys is really important to monitor. And I think, I've never heard Dave Wallace talk about anyone more highly than Greg Allen. B, Budzinski is really high on him. C, Allen plays the year mostly injured in Double A. Struggles a bit offensively compared to his past production. The Indians have no issue skipping him AAA, playing him 20 games in the big leagues. When they didn't give some other guys who'd been really productive in AAA a shot. And to me, that sort of like demonstrates the priority they have in developing Greg Allen and the future they see with the Indians. He's raked this spring. He has really good play discipline. Raking this spring doesn't matter a ton, but I think he's someone who, when he gets back to being healthy offensively, is going to be productive enough to be a really good fourth outfielder or maybe a starting center fielder.
I'm having a tough time. Like you said, they've handled him really well. I'm having a tough time seeing his path to Cleveland.
I'm not. Have you looked at the outfield recently, Gage? Come on.
You guys that loves.
Yeah, I mean, does he? I mean, are we? I just feel like we're like a Lonnie Chisenhall or Brantley injury away from both Dave. Like, if Brantley doesn't play opening day, you have both Davis and Upton making the team. So you have Davis, Upton, Zimmer, Chisenhall.
Who knows what's going on with Geyer?
I don't think he's going to be ready for opening day. And then you're one injury away from who? Like, I think you're either going to give it to Richie Schaefer, who the Indians have shown no priority to. I don't know. I'm telling you, Greg Allen's going to play a lot in Cleveland this year if he's healthy.
He's just his options will keep him.
Yeah, he's not starting in Cleveland. We know that.
No.
Yeah.
So maybe if Upton struggles right off the bat, then maybe that's his path right there.
Or Rajay. I don't know.
Yep, but I'm excited about Greg Allen. I would like to see him up there.
You're raining on my parade. All right. Minuteman tickets. Check it out. You can look them up online. Easy access. Great customer service. They're in it to provide you with access to tickets without a lot of hassle. Check them out. That's it for now. It's the end of.
We're open to beer sponsors.
We are open to beer sponsors. We'll say Market Garden has really been impressing me recently, so we'll be honored to reach out to them in some capacity. But anyway, we'll talk to you soon, Cleveland.